another Marine. He served for 20 years and 7 days, retiring in 2009. I think the joke is he doesn't know how he got that extra week out of him still, but it's the Marines, so they figured it out for sure. Today, Mark works as a team leader for week-long programs at Semper Fi Odyssey in Boswell, Pennsylvania. For the past 13 summers, he has flown a helicopter for the U.S. Forest Service fighting fires throughout the western states. And he currently trains pilots in the art of science of fighting wildfires from the air while keeping his feet on the ground in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. His story tonight is titled Kairos. Mark?
As we increase velocity into the night, I hear the shrill stridulation of Doppler effect crickets. We travel slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. The stars sliding in and out of existence, away and towards, into all your yesterdays and all my tomorrows, where we discover that all that has happened had already happened. Isn't it always the way? All those minutes and seconds, all those clock-tick moments, if time is now, then what were they for? In 2016, I was introduced to this poem that was written by a British poet, Joanna Tilsley, during a very intense fire season. And I found it to be compelling, and it was beautiful, and I knew it was deep, and it was just, I was confused by it because I couldn't really figure out what does it mean. So I thought, what better way to find out what a piece means than to contact the person who wrote it. And so I sent an email and waited for a response and received this as part of her response. Time is a dimension in which events can be ordered from the past through the present into the future, and also the measure of durations of events and the intervals between them. The ancient Greeks had two words for time: chronos, meaning chronological or sequential time, and kairos, signifying a time lapse, a moment of indeterminate time in which everything happens, the right or opportune moment, the supreme moment. Time is now. So on Wednesday, November 26, 2003, Camp Pendleton, California, we received a warning order that on January 4th, 2004, Marine Light Attack Helicopter Squadron 775 would be activated for a period not to exceed 24 months in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Many of my squadron mates had really looked forward to that day since the war in Iraq had began earlier that year. And for me, I dreaded that moment. And for 2 years, I had sat there and said, how can we accept to go do something that I knew both in my head and my heart made no sense to me? And not supporting the war, but I also knew what I had signed up for, been trained for, and paid to do. And so I had decided the only thing I could rest with is going forward with the skills that I had. If anything I did would help even just one person make it home, then my part in it would have been a success. On to March 30th, 2004, 12:30 in the morning. We delivered a patient successfully to the combat hospital in Baghdad, returned the surgeon safely back to his home base, and the only thing we had to do at that time was for our 3 helicopters, an Army Black Hawk medevac aircraft, and our 2 Cobra helicopters to safely return to our base. Our perspective was narrowed by our night vision goggles and the darkness that surrounded us. Our senses were heightened because of the enemy threat that was in the area as we were midway between Ramadi and Fallujah. An inability to contact the tower as we came into land, confusion in the flight, aircraft out of position, inability to talk to each other because the only frequency that we had that was common was being clobbered by somebody on the ground, confusion, decisions that had to be made based upon what we saw, but no way to communicate that intent to anybody. So I made a choice, and at that moment in time, it seemed like the right one. I got back in my position in the flight, returned to a hover, started to turn, looked at the Black Hawk, exhaled deeply, and said, okay, this is all right. And then I said, well, what in the hell is that? And I heard a ripping sound it was like a saw blade that I've never heard before. Looked at the instrument panel, it was just a wash of green, unreadable. The only thing I could see out of the peripheral vision was the ground coming up, and I knew we were going to hit the ground, and it was one last instinctive pull that collected the cushion to blow. Then silence, darkness, a sense of peace, and then an awareness. I'm alive. Our two Cobra helicopters had collided, and fortunately all four of us had walked away. So later on that day, I dragged my bruised body and ego over to work, and a Marine gunnery sergeant who worked for me came up and gave me this big, enthusiastic hug and said, "God has a plan for you, sir." And I looked at her, and I was not religious or spiritual in any sense at the time, and I thought, how patronizing is this? So it seemed condescending to me. And I also thought, if there's any truth to what she just had to say, I think I could have taken the message in a little more different way. But what this did was it started me on a quest. And I was trying to figure out if there is this plan, there's some purpose for me to still be here. What is it? And when is it going to become apparent to me? And I expected I was going to have some divine revelation someday. There was going to be some epiphany that was going to tell me that this is it. This is the thing, man. And so as the minutes and seconds became years, I started to examine all the different aspects of my life and tried to figure out, was it being a father? Was it being a husband? Was it teaching the teens at our church? Was it the work I was doing with combat veterans? Was it fighting fires out west? And I could say to myself, like, every single one of these things are very important, but none of them were striking me like a lightning bolt saying, like, yeah, that's the thing. So one morning, I was making the bed, and this thought popped in my head, and it says, you know what? You're not going to be the president of the United States. And I laughed to myself. I thought, yeah, that's kind of silly, but it had been something that about kindergarten time I had thought, like, yeah, anybody could be the president. And then I realized that if it's not going to be something that's that huge and that remarkable, then maybe this plan or this purpose rests in the unremarkable. So it took 10 years, over 10 years, for the poem Time to find me. And so in Northern California, I hiked Lassen Peak one day during a very threatening, stormy day. And I spent the day mulling over this insight that Joanna Tilsley had sent me. And as I thought about it, I was starting to think back to all these different moments in my life that had occurred, both good and bad, and how they started to kind of connect through space and time, and all these different trajectories that could have happened but didn't. And realize, like, this is where I am right now at this very moment on this mountain, and all those things happen to be here. And if any other thing had gone some different way, I wouldn't be right here right now. And I started to sense like a vibration that made me feel like I was starting to lose my mind. When I went to work the next day, taking this vibration with me, I realized that our fuel truck driver who refueled my aircraft, and I worked with this guy for 4 years, extremely difficult person to deal with. And I had always been polite to him, and I would say I tolerated him, but I was never really kind to him. So taking this vibration and this sense of trying to figure out, like, why am I here? I decided during the same exchange that he and I had on any other given day that I was going to be kind and accept him for every single thing that he was, and not what I wanted him to be, but the person that he was. And in that unremarkable exchange, when he drove away in the fuel truck, I sat down on the helicopter and started to take my boots off, and when I looked up, it was as if a veil had been torn from my eyes, and I looked at the hangar and I could see all the molecules in the structure of the building like vibrating. Everything I looked at was total clarity. And then I started to see that this moment, March 30th, 2004, Kairos, this defining moment of indeterminate time in which everything happened, was trying to show me this, and it was right in front of me, and I was missing it the whole time. And it was that it's not the remarkable, but it's in the unremarkable. And it's in every single moment that's presented to us. Every interaction, every moment became the right or opportune moment. And I started to understand that it is this. It's not a thing, it's everything. And it's this opportunity right here for you and me and all of us to be in this space by whatever remarkable or unremarkable events in our lives brought us here right now. And that this is the supreme moment. And that's when I realized that all those clock-ticked seconds, all those minutes, were, are, and always will be the plan. Thank you.